If I told you someone fell 33,000 feet from a plane without a parachute and survived, what would your first reaction be? Would you say, "Wow, that's incredible"? Or maybe, "What are the odds of that?" Now here's a tougher question. Is surviving something like that really lucky, or just plain unlucky to have been in that situation in the first place? Stick around, because by the end of this story, you might find your answer isn't as obvious as it seems. And let me tell you, this story gets wilder the deeper we go. Let's talk about Vesna Vulović, a name you might not know, but after hearing this, you'll never forget. Born in 1950 in Belgrade, Serbia, Vesna grew up with big dreams. She was a huge fan of the Beatles, you know, the Hey Jude guys, and that obsession took her all the way to the UK to learn English. But like most young dreamers, life called her back home. Once back, she met a friend who worked as a flight attendant, saw the fancy uniform, and decided, "That's the job for me." Now there was just one little hiccup. Vesna had low blood pressure, and she knew this would likely make her fail the required medical test to become a flight attendant. But Vesna wasn't one to back down from a challenge. She drank a ton of coffee before her exam to artificially raise her blood pressure, and, what do you know? She passed. A little caffeine-fueled determination got her a job with JAT Yugoslav Airlines in 1971. Life was good, and Vesna was living her dream. But dreams have a funny way of turning into nightmares when you least expect it. Fast forward to January 26, 1972. Vesna was scheduled to work on JAT Flight 367 from Stockholm to Belgrade, with stops in Copenhagen and Zagreb. Here's the kicker. Vesna wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. There was a mix-up, and the airline accidentally assigned her instead of another stewardess named, also Vesna. Seems like the name Vesna was the Jessica of Yugoslavia back then. The flight took off from Copenhagen at around 3:15 p.m. with 28 people on board, 23 passengers and 5 crew members. Everything was smooth sailing until the plane reached Czechoslovakia. About 45 minutes into the flight, disaster struck. Out of nowhere, the plane exploded at 33,000 feet. The cabin ripped apart, the passengers and crew were sucked into the freezing air, and, just like that, everyone was falling to what seemed like certain death. Everyone except Vesna. Wait a second. Let's pause here. If you were falling from 33,000 feet, what do you think would happen? Would you black out? Scream all the way down? Or would you even have time to process what was happening? It's terrifying to think about, right? Well, here's where Vesna's story gets even crazier. When the plane exploded, Vesna was pinned inside the tail section by a food cart. That section of the plane plummeted through the air and crashed into a snow-covered forest near a small village in what is now the Czech Republic. The thick snow and trees softened the impact just enough to save her life. When villagers rushed to the wreckage, they found only one survivor, Vesna Vulović. A local man named Bruno Honka, who had been a medic during World War II, heard her screaming amidst the wreckage. He ran over, pulled her out, and gave her first aid until rescuers arrived. Vesna's injuries were horrific. She had a fractured skull, 2 broken legs, 3 crushed vertebrae, a fractured pelvis, and multiple broken ribs. She slipped into a coma shortly after being rescued, but against all odds, she survived. Doctors later credited her survival to a couple of factors. First, her low blood pressure, the same condition she'd tried to hide to get her job, caused her to pass out quickly after the cabin depressurized, which may have prevented her heart from bursting on impact. Second, the combination of being trapped in the tail section and landing in deep snow saved her from what should have been certain death. The explosion itself was later blamed on a bomb placed in the baggage compartment, allegedly by Croatian nationalists. But no one was ever arrested for the attack. But hold on, let's address the elephant in the room. How does someone go from surviving a plane explosion to becoming a national hero? And more importantly, how did Vesna feel about it? Stick around, because the story doesn't end here. In fact, this is just the beginning. Before we dive deeper into the unbelievable story of Vesna Vulović and her miraculous survival from 33,000 feet, I need your help with something. I'm on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and your support would mean the world to me. So if you're enjoying this story and want more incredible tales like it, please hit that subscribe button. All right, let's get back to it. Vesna spent months in the hospital recovering from her injuries. When she woke up from her coma, she was paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors told her she might never walk again, but Vesna wasn't one to give up. Through sheer determination, she regained the ability to walk, though she was left with a permanent limp. Her recovery was nothing short of miraculous, but the emotional toll was just as heavy as the physical one. Vesna later said she had no memory of the crash or the explosion, which might have been a small blessing in disguise. When news of her survival broke, Vesna became a celebrity in Yugoslavia. People saw her as a symbol of hope and resilience. She was even recognized by the Guinness World Records in 1985 as the person who survived the highest fall without a parachute. Fun fact, her award was presented to her by none other than Paul McCartney of the Beatles, a surreal moment for a lifelong fan. But life wasn't all sunshine and roses. Vesna wanted to return to her job as a flight attendant, but Jet Airlines declined, likely fearing it would unsettle passengers to see her on board. Instead, they gave her a desk job. Vesna's love of travel remained undiminished, and she continued flying as a passenger. Ironically, people often wanted to sit next to her on flights, believing she was their lucky charm. Now here's a question for you. If you went through something as traumatic as Vesna did, would you want to fly again? Or would you swear off planes forever? Let us know in the comments below. In the years that followed, Vesna's life took several turns. In the 1990s, she became politically active, participating in protests against Serbian President Slobodan Milošević. This activism cost her her job, but it also earned her respect as someone who stood up for her beliefs. Despite her celebrity status, Vesna's later years were marked by personal struggles. She lived alone in her Belgrade apartment and avoided most interview requests, saying she was tired of being defined by the fall that had both made her famous and turned her life upside down. Yet, Vesna's story continues to inspire. Even with all the physical and emotional pain she endured, she never stopped fighting for what she believed in. Whether it was standing up to an oppressive regime or simply reclaiming her independence after her injuries, Vesna proved that survival isn't just about living through the moment. It's about what you do with the time you're given afterward. And there's something deeply human about that, isn't there? Life doesn't give us guarantees. Sometimes you survive an unimaginable fall only to face battles you never saw coming. But Vesna's life is a testament to resilience, even when the odds are stacked against you. Tragically, Vesna passed away in 2016 at the age of 66. Her body was discovered in her apartment after friends became worried when they hadn't heard from her. Despite the incredible story of her survival, Vesna's life was far from easy. She once said she didn't consider herself lucky to have survived the fall, citing the lasting physical and emotional scars it left behind. "The fall ruined my life," she said. "I am not lucky. I am the opposite." So, what do you think? Was Vesna lucky or unlucky? Is surviving a near-death experience a blessing or a curse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable stories like this one. Because trust me, there are plenty more where this came from.